The photograph trembled in Sarah's hands as she stared at the impossible image before her. There she was, standing in a field of sunflowers, smiling beside a man she had never seen before. But that wasn't the disturbing part. The disturbing part was the date stamped in the corner, August 15th, 2019. The same day her sister Emma had died in a car accident. The same day Sarah had spent alone in her apartment, mourning and refusing to see anyone. Yet here was undeniable proof that she had been somewhere else entirely, with someone else entirely, looking happy, looking different. The woman in the photograph had the same face, the same auburn hair, even the same small scar above her left eyebrow. But her eyes held a warmth Sarah hadn't felt in years, a lightness that seemed foreign to her very soul. As Sarah's fingers traced the edges of the mysterious photograph, one chilling question echoed through her mind. If she didn't remember taking this picture, what else had she forgotten? And more terrifyingly, who had she forgotten she was? Dr. Helena Voss had been Sarah's therapist for 3 months, and their sessions had become a lifeline after Emma's death. The grief had been overwhelming, but lately, something else had been troubling Sarah. Fragments of memories that didn't quite fit together. She would catch glimpses of conversations she couldn't remember having, wake up with the taste of foods she never ate, find clothes in her closet that weren't her style. Memory is a fragile thing, Dr. Voss had explained during their first session, her voice gentle but clinical. Trauma can create gaps, or sometimes our mind fills in spaces with fabricated details to protect us from pain. But as Sarah sat in the familiar leather chair, the photograph burning a hole in her purse, she wondered if her mind was protecting her from something far worse than grief. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting sharp shadows across Dr. Voss's face as she leaned forward, her pen poised over her notepad. "What brings you here today, Sarah?" The question that should have been simple felt like stepping into an abyss. Sarah's hand shook as she placed the photograph on the coffee table between them. Dr. Voss's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something that might have been recognition, quickly masked by professional concern. "I found this in my things," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't remember it being taken." Dr. Voss picked up the photograph, studying it with an intensity that made Sarah's skin crawl. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, filled only by the distant sound of traffic outside and the relentless ticking of the clock on the wall. When the doctor finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. "Sometimes our subconscious holds on to moments our conscious mind has deemed too painful to remember," she said, but there was something rehearsed about her words, as if she had prepared for this moment. "Tell me, Sarah, what do you remember about the day Emma died?" The question hit Sarah like a physical blow, because suddenly she wasn't sure she remembered anything at all. The memories that Sarah had clung to for months began to unravel like a sweater with a pulled thread. She remembered Emma's funeral, the rain on the church windows, the overwhelming scent of lilies. But when she tried to recall the actual day of the accident, the hours before she received the devastating phone call, her mind hit a wall of static. "I was at home," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, they felt hollow. I was reading, or maybe watching television. I can't." She trailed off as she realized she couldn't remember what she had been wearing, what she had eaten for breakfast, or even what day of the week it had been. Dr. Voss was taking notes now, her pen moving across the paper with quick, precise strokes. "Memory is a fragile thing," she repeated. But now she noticed how Dr. Voss's eyes kept drifting back to the photograph. "What matters is how we move forward. But Sarah was no longer interested in moving forward. She wanted to dig deeper into the past, no matter how dark it might be. That night, Sarah stood in her bathroom staring at her reflection in the mirror. The face looking back at her was familiar, yet somehow foreign. She touched the scar above her left eyebrow, a childhood accident involving a bicycle in a tree, and tried to remember when she had last really looked at herself, really seen herself. The woman in the photograph had been radiant, alive in a way that Sarah couldn't remember ever being. But more disturbing than the joy on her face were the subtle differences Sarah was beginning to notice. Her hair was styled differently, her posture more confident, her smile reaching her eyes in a way that Sarah's never seemed to anymore. As she stood there in the harsh fluorescent light, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She would find out who the man in the photograph was, and she would discover what had really happened on August 15, 2019. Even if it meant confronting the possibility that the life she thought she remembered might be nothing more than an elaborate construction of her damaged mind. The truth, whatever it was, had to be better than this uncertainty. Sarah's investigation began with the photograph itself. She took it to 3 different photo labs, hoping to learn something about when and where it had been developed. Each technician told her the same thing. The image was real, unaltered, and the paper stock suggested it had been printed sometime in the last 5 years. But none of them could tell her who had taken it or where. The breakthrough came when Sarah decided to reverse search the background landscape. The field of sunflowers wasn't just any field. It was Meadowbrook Farm, a popular photography location about 2 hours from her city. Sarah had never been there, or at least she had no memory of ever being there. The drive to Meadowbrook Farm felt like traveling through a dream. Every mile brought fragments of sensation, the smell of fresh earth, the sound of gravel under tires, the feeling of wind through an open car window. By the time Sarah reached the farm, her hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, and her heart was hammering against her ribs. The elderly farmer who owned the land nodded when Sarah showed him the photograph. "Oh yes," he said, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "I remember her. She came here with her husband several times last summer." The word husband hit Sarah like a physical blow. She stared at the farmer, her mouth opening and closing silently. "Her husband?" she finally managed to whisper. "Lovely couple," the farmer continued, oblivious to Sarah's distress. "She was always so happy, always laughing. He was quieter, more serious, but you could tell he adored her. They'd spend hours in the sunflower field, just talking and taking pictures." Sarah's world tilted on its axis. The woman in the photograph, the woman who looked exactly like her, had been here multiple times, had been married, had been happy, had been someone entirely different from the Sarah who stood here now, trembling and confused. "What was her name?" Sarah asked, although part of her already knew the answer would shatter something fundamental inside her. The farmer's brow furrowed in concentration. "Emma, I think? Yes, Emma. Sweet girl. Haven't seen her in months, though. I hope she's doing well." The ground beneath Sarah's feet seemed to disappear entirely. Emma, her dead sister's name. But Emma was dead, had been dead for almost a year. Unless… The drive back to the city was a blur of tears and fractured thoughts. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Had she somehow suppressed memories of her sister being alive? Had Emma faked her death? Or was there something even more sinister at play? When Sarah arrived at her apartment, she went straight to the box of Emma's belongings that she had never been able to bring herself to sort through. With shaking hands, she pulled out Emma's driver's license, birth certificate, and passport. The photographs showed the same face that Sarah saw in the mirror every morning, but something was different about the eyes, the expression, the way Emma held herself. It was then that Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. Emma's driver's license had been renewed just 2 months ago, 6 months after her supposed death. The address listed was not Emma's old apartment, but a house on the other side of town. A house that, according to the renewal date, Emma had moved to while she was supposedly lying in a grave. Sarah's hands shook as she reached for her car keys. She had to see this house. She had to know the truth. The house was a small, charming cottage with a white picket fence and a garden full of sunflowers. Sarah sat in her car across the street, watching the windows for any sign of movement. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn, and she felt like she was trapped in a waking nightmare. When the front door opened, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. A woman emerged who looked exactly like her, the same height, the same build, the same face. But there was something different about her posture, her movement, the way she carried herself. This woman moved with a confidence and grace that Sarah had never possessed. Behind the woman came a man, tall, dark-haired, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. The same man from the photograph. He wrapped his arms around the woman from behind, and she leaned into him with a familiarity that spoke of deep, abiding love. Sarah watched in horror as she realized she was looking at her own life, or rather, the life she could have had if she had made different choices, been a different person. The truth hit Sarah like a tsunami of understanding. The woman in the house wasn't Emma. Emma was dead, had been dead for almost a year. The woman living this perfect life, married to this perfect man, was Sarah herself. But not the Sarah who sat in her car trembling. This was who Sarah had been before the accident, before the grief, before the slow descent into the depression that had consumed her. Dr. Voss had been right about one thing. Memory was fragile, but she had been wrong about everything else. Sarah hadn't forgotten her past. She had created an entirely new version of herself to cope with a trauma so profound that her mind had literally split in two. The Sarah who lived in the cottage had chosen to forget Emma's death, to continue living as if nothing had happened. The Sarah who sat in the car had chosen to remember, to carry the weight of grief, to let that define her existence. As Sarah watched her other self laugh and kiss her husband, she realized that the most terrifying truth wasn't that she had lost her memory. It was that she had never lost it at all. The shadows of our memories hold secrets that sometimes we're not ready to face. Sarah's story forces us to confront an unsettling question. When trauma fractures our sense of self, which version of us is real? The one who remembers and suffers, or the one who forgets and finds happiness? This twisted tale of psychological survival leaves us wondering about the nature of identity itself. Are we the sum of our memories, or are we simply the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of an incomprehensible world? Perhaps the most chilling realization is that we might never truly know which version of ourselves is authentic, and maybe that's the point. What do you think happened to Sarah? Did she confront her other self, or did she choose to walk away from the truth? Share your theories in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious about how you interpret this mind-bending story. If this psychological thriller left you questioning reality, hit that like button and subscribe for more dark secrets and twisted tales that will keep you up at night. There are more stories lurking in the shadows of the human mind, waiting to be told. Until next time, stay kind, stay sharp, and stay curious.